From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hi again. You've managed to make it to another week of Chicago Newsroom right here on Can TV. I'm Ken Davis. So glad you're back with us because we've got so much to talk about. Today is Global Clear Out Your Google Identity Day, and we'll probably even talk a little bit about that. Although it's not a local issue, it's certainly a global issue. But we have with us today three people I have great respect for. I'm talking about Meribah Knight, and I'm talking about Rebecca Vevea, who's here today, and Hunter Klaus. Three people who, until just really almost hours ago, were working for the Chicago News Cooperative, which was another organization that I had great respect for here in Chicago. And unfortunately, due to reasons that I'm sure aren't clear to these people, and they're certainly not clear to me, one day last week or the week before, they just announced that they were giving it up and they were going to close the whole operation down, or at least suspend operations, which I guess is what you say when you're running a campaign, right? We're going to suspend operations. So we decided to bring these three great reporters, young reporters who've been working for CNC for quite a while now, and just have them sit around the table so we can keep CNC going for at least one more day right here on Can TV. We'll have a little meeting of the newsroom or something, because truly, between these guys, they were covering pretty much everything that was going on in Chicago, and I find that very cool. So first of all, I'm really sorry to hear what happened to you guys, but I'm sure you'll recover. As they say, you're young, right? You'll recover. You'll get work somewhere, I hope. Let's just start out with this Google thing, because I'm just really fascinated by the fact that there just seems to be just like it came out of nowhere 48 hours ago, this intense panic that everybody is feeling that, oh my God, Google is going to start sending messages to my wife about the late night surfing I've been doing, or knows all about my girlfriend and both girlfriends. What am I going to do now? So there's a panic abroad in the land, and I guess my reaction to that is that maybe it isn't quite as awful as we all think it is. But I thought it'd be interesting to get your perspectives, because I noticed that most, if not all of you, have Gmail accounts, right? Mm-hmm. So, so everything you've ever written has been read by some Google bot somewhere and is memorizing everybody you've written to and why you've written it. And really, they say they only want to do it just so they can advertise clothes to you or something, right? So tell me, is anybody here panicked?
I personally, I'm not, because I think that one of the misconceptions is that they're collecting more than they used to, and I don't think that they necessarily are. It's just streamlined in a different way. I think it does raise some interesting questions, and I think all of us are younger, so we kind of came of age during a time when everybody was like warning us not to put a lot of things out on the web and to be smart about what your online presence is. I do think it raises some strange questions that there's a file somewhere that, you know, when our generation gets to be the age of running for president, like, are those files going to then somehow be made public? Not that I'm sure about. I don't know all of the ins and outs of Google's policy, but I'd
yeah, I don't know if it's just because like I read like way too many Philip K. Dick books when I was in high school, but I'm kind of nervous. Unlike Facebook, where you can like really control what people see, if Google's just like going into my emails, I have no control over that, and I don't even know if they actually are doing that. And that to me makes me really worried.
Have you actually thought in the last, you must have thought a time or two in the last couple of days, what have I searched for in the last 6 months that I wouldn't?
Yeah, I regularly clean that out, but for a lot of reasons. But
you at least know how to clean out the social. Good. That's
I mean, yeah, like with GChat, like they at least give you like an option to like go off the record, so there's no records of like conversations that you have on that.
They tell you about.
And I use that like all the time, regardless of who I'm talking to. I just don't want I don't want there to be a permanent record of my conversations, especially if I'm talking to a source and it is already an off-the-record conversation.
There is there's just no question about the fact that this is one of these places where there's a generational divide, though, because those of us who came of age before there was a World Wide Web just sort of like, as this thing encroached and gradually began gobbling up all of our personal information that no one ever had before, we freak out about that in a way that you guys don't. And it's just so interesting to me to have a conversation like this, because more and more I'm beginning to realize that we're the guys who are wrong about this. It's just sort of like, the more exabytes of data that are out there about everybody, the less vulnerable we all become. I mean, I don't know. I saw this thing. Maybe.
I think. I mean, I'm not that worried about it. When it comes to Google streamlining what I'm searching on YouTube and what I'm searching on the search engine, all of the Google companies streamlining it into one unified place and giving me an ad that's better suited for a 29-year-old female is not something I'm really worried about. It's not any different than what they've been doing. What I would be concerned about is if they start taking that information and changing my search results. I don't want to not have access to everything that I need and think I need and don't think I need.
Well, and this is not Google. This happens to be Facebook. But you know, when Facebook sort of did that thing a few months ago, when they changed the algorithm around about your news feed and what you get. At first, I was so freaked out about that, because instead of getting a chronological display of everything people have posted, you get this thing sort of like, well, you've been cruising Hunter lately, so we'll put him up higher than your old friend from high school that you hardly ever, you hardly ever click on. And I thought that was an intense invasion of my privacy.
Yeah, I didn't like it either.
But the weird part about it was I started thinking about, it really is kind of cool, because it really is figuring out the stuff that I'd rather see earlier on. So it makes going through a little bit easier and faster. But I gave something up to get that convenience. I don't know what it was exactly, but I certainly gave. What it is they know. It freaks me out how much they know about what I do on Facebook. I don't want them to know that, but
I think what I'm more concerned about, and I don't think it's really in the conversation, but there was a Times article a little while ago about data mining and taking information from my credit card transactions. And not. I know we've all grown up in a generation where we know what we're putting on the internet. We know that people can see it, and we know it's accessible. I think what we don't know is that every time we swipe our credit card and Target prints us out a coupon that they know that we'll like based on what we've been purchasing, that scares me a little bit more.
The thing the other day about Target figured out some 13-year-old girl was pregnant before her parents. Well, it is. It's a
that's information
world.
We don't know that we're giving
But
up.
are you scared by it? Does this bother you, or do you just assume that this is the world that you live in now, and it's not that awful?
I mean, I think what scares me the most is how comfortable people can get with some of this stuff. Where, we've seen numerous stories before where someone does something like colossally stupid online. For example, a couple of months ago, there was a father on Facebook put a photo of his child wrapped up in duct tape. And I don't know what the thought process was behind posting that that photo, or let alone tying the kid up like that. But to me, it just signals that people feel a little too comfortable about what they put online. They think that there are no consequences sometimes, and that's not true.
Building on that too, I think that especially with younger kids and people in high school and college still, everybody kind of they have stupid things that they do and mistakes that they make, and that's part of life, and you learn from it, and then you are able to forget about it. And I think what these new regulations, what some of the concerning things are, is that it's harder to forget those things, and it's harder to kind of leave your past in the past. And even if you delete something, there's still record of it somewhere in a file in some office somewhere.
Nothing ever goes away.
Yeah, and so I think that the danger there then becomes like, are we preventing people from having life experiences where they learn from them? And I'm not saying that obviously binding your child in duct tape is not acceptable, but as a teenager,
I understand what you're saying.
And the cyberbullying thing, I think those things are, they should be learned from, and then moved on from. But
this is something that I think is, to me anyway, is a really serious concern. You have kids who are perhaps even getting arrested when they're 14, 15 years old at school because they got into a fight or something, right? And 20 years later, 15 years later, they're trying to get a job, and they can't get a job because that record of them exists out there, and there are a million sites that make money data mining to figure out who had a juvenile offense record when they were 14 years old, and they can pop that right up. It's just a line that comes up in your report, right? That kind of stuff really does freak me out because nobody has any control over their own lives anymore about what. Anyway, all right. So did you guys clear out your Google search memories or not?
I have not done that.
You have not done that.
I looked on the dashboard to see like what info they have on me, and some of the stuff was wrong. So I was not.
Google check your facts.
Yeah, for that reason, I wasn't like completely worried, but I did take a peek.
Well, I mean, we don't have time to do this now, but that even opens up another half-hour conversation that in addition to everything else that we're worried about is the simple fact that even Google is not perfect, and a lot of the information that they have on you is probably just dead wrong, and it's going to stay with you. It's now digitally attached to your skin and will be with you forever, all of us. All right, anyway, so let's talk about the news. Let's talk about the news, shall we? We have 3 good reporters with us today. We should take advantage of them. What do you make of this thing with Rahm Emanuel yesterday announcing the closing of the 2 power plants, Fisk and Crawford? Is that a big deal to you guys?
Yeah, I think it is definitely a big deal. It's a big deal for the people who live in the Pilsen neighborhood, where this has been a long simmering issue. Last year during the aldermanic campaign, it was perhaps one of the biggest issues in that race between.
Surprisingly so, I think.
Yeah, it just kind of came up and really defined who was supporting whom in that race. Alderman Danny Solis had had not signed on board with this ordinance that would have basically made them clean up their operation. The Clean Power Ordinance is what it was called. And his opponents in the race had signaled that they supported it. And when Solis was going into a runoff election, which he thought he was going to be able to avoid, he switched his support, and he said that he would support the ordinance, and when he did that, he picked up some union endorsements. So there was a momentum building during the race for the plants to clean up. After that, there was kind of a stagnant movement on the ordinance. No one really knew how Emanuel was going to address this issue. He was very quiet early on during the transition about it. There had come up some talk that he was trying to arrange some sort of agreement with Madigan that the plants would be able to do something with like cleaner energy. I think it was like wind farms or something like that. That plan didn't go anywhere, and now they reached an agreement.
Well, I think that there's something else that needs to be factored into this too. I mean, Rahm Emanuel was quick to take the credit for this, and he deserves some credit. There's no question about it. A huge coalition, as the Sun-Times pointed out in their editorial today, huge coalition of various environmentalists and community activists have been for 20 or 30 years been going after these plants. But when you get right down to it, folks, I think the reason that those plants are closing is because Midwest Gen, which bought these old clunkers off of Commonwealth Edison a few years ago, just kind of realized when they bought them that they were just buying these clunkers at the end of their lives and they would squeeze a little bit more life out of them. But that more and more with fracking, our friend fracking, natural gas is now so much cheaper that it just makes absolutely no sense to run these plants anymore.
I think you're absolutely right.
So that's what really happened, if you ask me. I mean, I think if natural gas had remained very high and nuke is out of the question for these kind of plants, and they could have kept running them at a pretty good profit, they would have run them forever. And the thing that really signals it to me is, as your own Carrie Liderson reported in the CNC a while back, Midwest closed the State Line plant on their own. They didn't need any community pressure for that. They just closed it because it was just no longer profitable. And those were the 3 that Sam Insel built around the time of the turn of the century, and they just have they've run out of steam, so to speak.
Yeah, the community like involvement in this I thought was like kind of entertaining at times. Like you had some people who went around the South Loop spreading this false rumor that a coal power plant was going to open up in the South Loop, and everyone was freaking out about that. Yeah. And then I think at one point someone actually climbed one of like the coals. Yeah. So it was an interesting story. I'm glad to hear that there was some sort of arrangement that they could bring to close it.
Well, I mean, they are definitely going to close, and it's not controversial. It's a good thing all the way around for everybody that they're going to close. Whether it was economic forces or political forces, we'll let history decide that one, I guess. Meribah, you have done some great work with CNC about homelessness in Chicago, and I really applaud you for doing it, because it's one of those stories that, I mean, I think we just have to all admit that, it's hard to get past the headlines in a lot of these stories, because it's kind of like, oh, this is just going to depress the hell out of me. I don't know if I want to read this, But to sort of start off on the political side of things, 10 years ago, Mayor Daley announced that he was going to, in addition to fixing the schools and fixing the CHA, he was going to end homelessness in Chicago in 10 years. How'd that work out?
Didn't work out.
Sorry to hear that.
Well, I mean, it wasn't only the plan's fault. I mean, the recession happened. No one expected that. But yeah, I mean, 9 years later from when they launched the plan, there's still homelessness. It's going up. Nationally, they project it's going to go up 5% in 3 years. And I really decided to dive into this issue because it's ultimately become an issue of poverty. It's not about the person on Lower Wacker with a cup in their hand. It's about the family with children who can't make ends meet. It's about the young person who's been kicked out of their house because they're gay or they're transgendered. It's about the kid who goes to sleep on a friend's couch every night and goes to CPS in the morning. I mean, these are all the people that are homeless. And it's really about being precariously housed. And that's what I wanted to focus on in the series that I did called Castaway for the News Cooperative and the Times. And what I really wanted to focus on when I reported, on the issue of homelessness in the city. There are definitely still people that are chronically homeless, that have substance abuse problems, that are disabled. But there are also people that have none of those problems. And there's mental illness as a factor in it too, and budgets keep getting cut, and there's just going to be more and more of those kinds of people, and we don't really recognize them as a city because they're not apparent to us as being homeless.
Well, I think that's part of why it's so important to report on this, because when you think of homeless, you think of the people with the little signs and the piece of cardboard sitting on Michigan Avenue or something, or at the expressway exits. But it's really not that now. It's functioning people who are. I shouldn't say that like the other people are not functioning, but what I'm trying to say is,
they're engaged in life.
Who are engaged in life, who have jobs, who are.
They're part of society.
They are in every way. How do we put this properly? They look like they're kind of conventional people in society, but they can't afford housing.
Right, and they're engaging in other aspects of society, the school system, and some of them may have jobs. I mean, there's the working poor, and so those people really came out when the National Alliance, the Chicago Alliance to End Homelessness had their kind of 3-day meetings. They called it the Charette Week, and it was 3 days of really a conversation between experts in the city and consumers and what was going on, so that they can now use this, because over the next couple months in the spring, which isn't that far, they're going to unveil the new plan that Rahm Emanuel asked them to produce. And really what came up in those meetings was providers saying, the funding that only goes to those with substance abuse problems, and the funding that I get from federal funding is no longer applicable to the people that are walking through my door. I'm getting the people that just got laid off, that can't make ends meet, and we don't have any money for those people, and we're serving those people more and more. And these kind of this diversity of faces kind of came up in these talkings, and they were physically there as well as represented by the providers. They were just saying, I'm not disabled, I'm not eligible for this housing, but I don't have anywhere to go. So
a whole different kind of homelessness, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was my usual snarky self about Mayor Daley just now about, well, how did that work out? But you also point out that a lot of things were accomplished as part of that plan. I mean, there was a lot of
There was a real
development.
housing first push. So it's about, you know, cutting the shelter beds, cutting emergency housing, and getting people into permanent supportive housing. And then a new kind of housing was developed in that plan called interim. Interim housing was really basically the transitional housing. It's like 120 days. And what came out, you know, that was a good idea. It was a good idea to get people into a continuum, you know, not just kind of cycling through shelter beds and emergency services, but getting them into some kind of permanent housing. But what has happened over the past 9 years with developing interim is that actually interim isn't recognized as, it isn't eligible for federal funding because it doesn't, people don't become, or they're not chronically homeless. So it's kind of in this no man's land. So what the city thought they were developing as this kind of really nice in-between is now not eligible for a lot of money that they need. And so what came to be one of the most contentious conversations over those 3 days was the interim housing model and how some people just think it needs to be abolished completely. And those are 3,000 beds. You know, so that it's really, there's going to be a lot going on the next couple months, and that's why I wanted to report on this. I knew that this was coming down the pike. I knew that this is an issue of poverty. I knew that we were going to have to revise and recalibrate this plan, and it's been really interesting to kind of watch it unfold.
And I sincerely hope you get to continue to report on it because you've been doing some very good work.
Thank you.
Becky, let's jump into schools. Again, we're running really short on time here. Mayor Emanuel yesterday did something that came out of left field to me. I wasn't aware this was even in the works. This thing about 6-year sort of tech school things, high schools.
Right. I believe, yes. So they announced there are 5 high schools that are now going to be partnered with a local corporation or business. Motorola, Verizon, IBM, I believe is one. And basically the idea is to get the students in those high schools on track to graduate for one, and also, you know, on track to an associate's degree that then would open up a lot more opportunities for them in the local economy so that they are able to kind of find a place in society. And I think, you know, the mayor as well as the federal government has been trying to push the idea of community colleges. And so this is another example of partnering with city colleges in Chicago to provide students with a higher education, some form of higher education that will improve their life outcomes, really.
I mean, this is, I think, a new direction for CPS, right? I mean, they've had vocational schools in the past, but those were not. I mean, that wasn't anything like this, where you're talking about really a focused track to get you into a high-tech company or something.
Specific company. Yeah, I mean, there's been career tech ed programs in a lot of the high schools, and my impression is that, you know, in the last few years, they've kind of cut back a lot of those career tech ed programs at a lot of schools, and they've lost a lot of resources in that area because they're costly. And what they're going towards now is these sort of corporate partnerships that will help keep those going and provide the company with an incentive to have a trained workforce and provide students with kind of a more direct path towards an occupation. And one thing to note too, there was a high school, I think this is kind of based on a high school that opened a year ago under a similar model with, I think it was an IBM school, that has been now open for a year. So we don't know what the results are at that high school.
Where is that?
It's out in New York City.
Oh, it's not here.
No, it's not. It's not here. It's out in New York City. So it was based, I think, in part on that. One of the times I interviewed Brizard when he first came here, he had mentioned how he was hoping to do that sort of a thing and get other
an idea brought with him.
different types of high schools so that kids have more options.
You know, this I guess ties in. Hunter, I don't know if you were following this, but also Emanuel in the last couple of days has been touting his new 60-page report that cost a lot of money, that a lot of big companies participated in, that said, in essence, we've lost a decade. We've been sort of treading water economically. We haven't really made progress. And this, I guess, ties in with that, right? Because it's, I mean, it's part of the thing.
Yeah, I guess you could like kind of see it that way. Yeah, I can see some of this stuff tying together. Emmanuel wants to make Chicago, or he wants to increase manufacturing in Chicago. He wants to increase exporting. He wants to make it more of like an entertainment hub. He wants to increase infrastructure. Actually, today he'll be meeting with he'll be meeting with former President Bill Clinton, announcing some sort of infrastructure plan. So
Wow.
it seems like they're already moving along with some of the provisions in this report. But
What would Bill Clinton be? Well, by the time you watch this, dear viewer, you'll know what we don't know right now. So we'll have to let that one go. Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting plan. We'll see what happens with it. I would imagine that they already have some things lined up to announce from the plan, and Emmanuel kind of hinted at this yesterday at the news conference. I also saw this as kind of like, a game plan for the NATO G8 summits, about what kind of discussions they're going to be having with international officials when they're here this summer. So it's going to be interesting. I think, the devil is always in the detail. How exactly are they going to accomplish this? How are they going to fund it? That's what I'm looking out for.
In our last minute or two here, Becky, again, coming back to the same thing with the schools. We all know that J.C. Brizard and Karen Lewis are engaged in some kind of conversation. They're in pre-meetings or meetings. Karen Lewis is saying that they should spend $750 million more on schools, and Brizard is not saying, but you know that his boss is telling him to cut.
Right. So yeah, the union put out their plan for improving schools, and in that document, I mean, most of the news that came out of it was the total amount that their plan would cost, and the number of new positions. I believe it was about 5,000 in both teachers and nurses and counselors and social workers. And it's interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out as far as their negotiations go. But the union's position, and a lot of what that document alluded to, is that this is about priorities, and I think that the two parties are on pretty opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of what their priorities are. So even though the union's price tag was high, what they were saying in that document is that, if you just, change your priorities to these things, then you shift those resources that you currently are pouring into other things.
Right.
Into what we want.
And that report was really about trying to define what the priorities should be going into contract negotiations. Right. And it was, it was interesting, as they announced their plan, someone had leaked to the media what the teachers union wants from the contract negotiations. Right. Specifically a pay raise.
We have to cut it. I'm sorry to say. I told you, I warned you beforehand. This half hour is going to go very quickly. So you guys are all free agents at this point, I assume, and I wish you all the best. I really do. I hope that that things work out well for you. These guys were the heart and soul of the Chicago News Cooperative, which closed last week, and we wanted to have them back here, and I hope you'll come many, many more times and keep the conversation going with us, okay? Thanks so much for watching. It's a production of Chicago Newsroom, of course. It's a production of CAN TV, and it's a community service of CAN TV. You can see this and all the other programs right here on cable, but you can also go to cantv.org and see other programs, and you can just watch them online. You can go to CanTV/newsroom and see the archives of this show. So there's so much you can do. Check us out online and check out the podcast too. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks so much for watching us, and we will see you right back here again 1 week from now on Chicago Newsroom. Thanks.